Hi everyone, welcome to my presentation on web accessibility. I will be going over what web accessibility is, who it helps, and the basic ways to improve your personal coding habits to create more accessible sites. To start, let's go into a little bit about the basics of what it is and what started a culture that encourages and rewards the accessibility of media. So first, we have what and why. A quote from an article on accessibility on Adobe's website sums up the what and why of web accessibility perfectly. It says in 1972, Julia Child's cooking show, The French Chef, included captions for the first time in television history. The producers wanted to reach a broader audience, including deaf and hard of hearing viewers. Nowadays, the FCC requires closed captioning on 100% of new television programming and 75% of older television programming. Closed captioning laws were just the beginning of a more inclusive future. Over time, the government enacted more laws for people with disabilities. In 1990, United States lawmakers launched the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA. They sought to prohibit discrimination and enable access for individuals in all areas of public life, including jobs, school, transportation, public and private places. This includes conditions that affect mobility, sight, hearing, speech, touch, and learning disorders. There are more than 7.7 billion people on this earth, and not one of us is the same. We are all unique and have different needs. We deserve equal access to information. As designers who work in technology, we should make sure that everything we create is accessible and usable. Implementing accessible products and services not only avoids discrimination and lawsuits, it improves usability for all types of visitors. As a result, you will reach a bigger market, have more impact, make more money, and it's great for SEO. So who is affected by sites not using correct accessibility inclusion? So this is a graph. So we have about 8.2 of the world's population has difficulty lifting or grasping things. This could, for example, impact their use of a mouse or a keyboard. 6.3% have a cognitive, mental, or emotional impairment. This could include a neurological disorder, such as epilepsy, where flashing pop-ups or elements can cause seizures, or Arlen syndrome, which can cause text or print to swirl, become blurry, or other distortions when on a white background. 3.3 have vision impairment. These people might rely on a screen magnifier or a screen reader, or might have a form of color blindness. And 3.1% have a hearing impairment. They might rely on transcripts and or for audio and visual media. The same graph. These seem like small numbers when looking at percentages of the world's population. Let's look at it in comparison with actual numbers. When we look at the actual numbers, you can see that it is a much bigger issue than the percentages make you seem to believe. When we look at them, even just visual impairment, it's 8.1 million people. So 3.3% seems really small, but it's 8.1 million people affected by visual impairment, and that's a huge amount of people. These are very serious issues that can cause great difficulty when navigating the web. They are also very simple fixes where we, some beginner and some who are well-versed in coding, can create regular habits of checking for and implementing basic accessibility into our code. I always think about the videos that we see where there are people that are colorblind and they get the chromatic glasses for the first time and suddenly their world is so different, or kids who get cochlear implants, or adults that get cochlear implants, but there are also those who can't get those. They can't get the glasses, they can't get the cochlear implants, but they should still be able to see the web and hear the web the same way, or not necessarily the same way, but just as easy as we do. All of these people deserve to be able to surf the web just as freely as you or I. So not only does poor accessibility impact the people with disabilities and other inabilities, but it also impacts elderly people, people on small screens, tablets, phones, or watches, people with temporary disabilities such as broken wrists or forgotten glasses. It also affects people who have slow internet connection. I know that we have really bad Wi-Fi and sometimes it just doesn't load pictures and it's really frustrating. But having certain accessibility code helps with that. So what can we do? What are some practical ways to make and keep our sites accessible to all people no matter their abilities? How do we make our sites more accessible? The first option is color. Your color choice matters, and not just from a design standpoint. When choosing your color schemes, be sure to use contrasting colors. You want them to be stark and different shades too. Go the extra mile, check for gray levels. When you look at this, you see A, and if you're not colorblind, you're like, oh, those are two really different colors. It's orange and green. They're very different. But clearly, I put figure B into Photoshop and made it grayscale, and you can't see the 74 that is in figure A at all, and it is the exact same picture. So people who have difficulty seeing color will have no understanding of your design if you only rely on your color choices. So, needless to say, don't just rely on color. Color matters, but don't let it work alone. There are other elements that help. Additional things you can do and should do to your code is adding labels, icons, or explanations, not just saying, here's an email, but adding an icon there so that people that maybe can't read will know, oh, that's an envelope, that's either the address or an email, or a telephone so that they know, oh, that's the phone number that I need to look for. Changing the weight, type, style, all of these text pieces are different sizes, and your eye, through visual hierarchy, is drawn to what is important, just like your headings would be with H1, H2, H3. You want to make sure that you're using that to draw people's eye where it should go, just like color would. And then also with links, if you don't underline your links, then make them a different color than your other text, or include non-color signals like the carets at the end. Links should be descriptive and not just click here. Think about what happens when they click and then tell people that, because sometimes it'll look like an annoying pop-up, or people will think that it's going to give them a virus. But if you did it, you want them to be able to click on that link and trust that what it says is where it's going to go. Images. If you're writing code, you should know your audience. If you're writing a site about dyslexia, having large amounts of text is not going to be effective. So include images and graphs where they're needed and where they're necessary. When you use images, always include alt text. I know this seems like it should just be a habit, but I know I forget sometimes, so it's a really good reminder that people that use screen readers identify images and it explains their context to those readers. It also helps users like me when my signal or my connection is disrupted or slow, that this is the image that should be showing up, but because I put the alt text, I see that what should be there is a picture of a field on a nice day. It also can help you know if you haven't included the JPEG file in your site files. So that can be really helpful when coding large amounts of text as well, and pictures. The third way to be sure to have good accessibility is your code structure. Your code should always be formatted the way that you read. It shouldn't be jumping around. It shouldn't be crazy and everywhere. Your CSS should not be rearranging your code or organizing it as far as order goes. It should just be formatting it. So the way that we format our code is really important. Make sure that the structure of it, your headings correspond correctly. They're not jumping around like this example. You want it to go H2, H3, and if it goes back to H2, that's fine, but just make sure it's not your first heading is H6 and your second body text is H1, because that's ineffective and code readers get really confused as well. For your form labels, make sure that you don't leave blank boxes so that people know what to put in them. It also helps with code readers so that the software that it uses recognizes exactly what's supposed to go in the box, and people that use visual readers and things like that can also use that to fill it out with verbal audio commands. Sorry. One more thing about code structure. You should always ensure that direct accessibility with your user interfaces. Basically, this means that a user should be able to use their keyboard the same way they use their mouse, the same way they use their finger. You do not want to override the default setting, which would be using tab to move to different boxes or to select different things. It is a default setting, and you can override it so that it's only usable with a click or things like that, but you don't want to do this unless you're 100% sure that that is necessary, because it does make it difficult for people who can't use a mouse or can't use a keyboard, things like that. And then last is w3.org has an entire site dedicated to the legal structure and necessity for web accountability. A lot of the information that I found was from this site. It has ways to plan for, test, and research your guidelines of web accessibility, and I highly recommend going on it and just seeing what it is and what the legal ramifications are of not having your website accessible to everybody. And so to conclude, when we code thoughtfully and honestly in a more organized way, it not only helps those who use various accessibility tools, but it also is rewarded by Google's search engine optimization tools. The ways to keep our sites acceptable are not difficult, accessible, I guess, and acceptable. And though they take more thought and time, it's well worth the peace of mind and the knowledge that no matter who comes onto your site, that they'll be able to enjoy it. That's really important for both you as a coder, you as a web developer, you as a web designer, or your client. And last but not least is my Works Cited page. So these are all sites that you can go on to learn more. And then the Ally project is really good because it talks about all the things. It's a checklist, and it's all the things that you can check off and make sure that your site is as accessible as possible. So yeah, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to let me know. Thanks.